Thank you for tuning in. New SEC podcast. We're talking about Ole Miss traveling to Kentucky, a rematch from last year's game. We know Kentucky would want nothing more than to have a repeat of last year's game, and Ole Miss would want the opposite. And so for this week, what do we think here at the New SEC podcast of Ole Miss taking on Kentucky?
Maybe a hot take. It wouldn't shock me if we had a repeat of last year. I wouldn't be necessarily surprised. I don't think that that's going to happen, but I'm seeing some things here and there that
What
ain't
you
no
see?
shot. I saw someone saying, it would shock the football if Kentucky could repeat last year. I don't think it would shock anyone. I think that Ole Miss is potentially vulnerable. I think Kentucky is just as vulnerable as last year. I think these are two teams that have weak spots that the other team is going to try to exploit.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be trying to exploit each other's weaknesses, of course, in this game. And I think what plays well in Ole Miss's favor is Kawan Lacey coming back. Last week he had 3 touchdowns, 108 rushing yards. I expect him to potentially have a big performance in this game this week. But I'm sure Kentucky's going to be game planning on how to slow down the rushing attack.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to want the rushing attack to happen. They would rather Austin Simmons throw the ball. Now, he didn't look bad in the game last week. He was a little bit more conservative than what Ole Miss got out of the last few years with Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart, much more downfield thrower. He had 66% of his yards last year at Ole Miss were on passes over 10 yards. Austin Simmons last week only 35%. Most of the passes he was throwing were 10 yards or less. Super conservative. He took a few shots downfield that didn't really connect. So if you are Kentucky, really you're trying to keep everything in front of you. You're not as worried about the downfield threat. You're more worried about, hey, 10 yards or less, what can we do? Whether that's the rush, whether that's the short pass, that's the focal point, I think, for Kentucky.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And you're trying to find opportunities to force turnovers, right? The theme of this season across college football has been young quarterbacks. I watched the Miami Notre Dame game, and a lot of the passes for CJ Carr were a lot of times like screens and 3 yards passes. Same story for Austin Simmons, right? He averaged 11 yards per pass caught, 2 interceptions on the game. So that's against Georgia State, right? Kentucky's defense seemingly should be better than Georgia State's, and so if they can find a way to force turnovers on this Kentucky side, that changes the game. For Kentucky, what do we think about this offense going against this Ole Miss defense in terms of what that looks like?
Offense was pretty bad last week, not great. And it's not all Calzada's fault. There were drops, plays not being made, not necessarily drops, but you had an opportunity to make a play, didn't happen. I think that there's confidence there still from the quarterback where he'll still come into this game and take some shots. The running back play was great. Dante Dowdle. Yeah. We put him on we made a note of him on our Team of the Week video, which you can watch to recap week 1. He was pretty solid in the running game, and Ole Miss gave up 5.5 yards per carry last week versus Georgia State. So I think that Dante Dowdle will be a feature back in this game. They're not going to rely as much on the pass. It wasn't working last week. If you can run and you can get similar results that Georgia State got, albeit it didn't play out for them, then that could be a way for Kentucky to at least get the ball downfield.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to rely on him and Seth McGowan as well to kind of be that 1-2 punch when it comes to rushing the football. And it's coming off of week 1. It's such a limited sample size with Ole Miss playing Georgia State, and of course Kentucky taking on Toledo. Seemingly Toledo probably will have a better record than Georgia State, but we don't know. But when you look at what Kentucky can ultimately double down on this offense, rushing the football, they should be able to do that. What concerns me a little bit is that Ole Miss was really able to shut down that Georgia State passing attack, and I'm sure they're looking to do something similar against Kentucky in this game. And so for Calzada, 1 interception, no touchdowns, gonna need to see a bigger performance in this game to really give them a shot to win the game this year. Last year's game didn't have a ton of offensive fireworks, right? And Vandergriff was more or less inept as a quarterback, was able to win the game, but going to need to see more from Calzada this year for this game for Kentucky to have a shot to win.
Yeah, you're going to have to. I mean, the offense for Ole Miss looks weaker than last year, and if Kentucky was able to hold them last year, I mean, there's an opportunity for Kentucky to hold Ole Miss this year. There is, and it's because Austin Simmons he looked good in the game. He made a couple mistakes. The blindside hit turned to a pick. There was also the bad decision interception that he threw as well. One, really his fault, more or less. But there's opportunities to get turnovers in this game. If you can keep it low scoring, you don't have to rely as much on your offense. So the game, I'm not going to put too much pressure on Kentucky offense because I don't think it's realistic to expect a huge turnaround. That if it didn't happen against Toledo, it's all of a sudden going to come forward and click against Ole Miss. It's got to be the defense.
It's definitely going to come down to the defense, and I think that's kind of the story on both sides of the ball here. And so I'm just excited to watch the game and kind of see what happens. Any final thoughts on this game, keys to the game, this 10.5-point spread, 52.5 over under? Like, what are kind of some of your final thoughts?
I think this game will be a little bit slow. There's going to be some punting. I think a defensive game, like you mentioned. I don't think that either team right now at this point in the season is a big play team. Neither one is necessarily explosive. Austin Simmons 2 for 6 on passes over 20 yards. We know what Zach Calzada did last week. So there's not going to be a lot of explosiveness. I think I'm taking the under in this one, the over under 52.5. So score check in this game. I do like Ole Miss in this one. I know I talked a lot about Kentucky, but I do like Ole Miss in this one, 24-10. So I do have them covering, but I don't think it's a bad showing from Kentucky. I just think they're starting to get a feel of what their offense will look like.
Yeah, I have a similar score, and I think that this Kentucky offense, when you have all these new pieces, right, and pieces that are still kind of starting to gel together, right? Jamori Macklin was there last year. He got 1 catch in this last game. Josh Caddis had a decent game, 43 yards at tight end. We want to see more for them kind of establishing their offense. And, I feel like we saw a lot from Ole Miss's offense. And so I'm not expecting Kawan Lacey to have 3 touchdowns like he did last week, but I do like Ole Miss in this game, 21-10. As well. So we want to know what y'all think here. Kentucky fans, Ole Miss fans, college football fans, avid gamblers, whoever you are. Let us know what you think. And until next time.